What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the School Site Corner. Today, we're actually going to be wrapping up this whole referral process and discuss eligibility. But before we do that, I kind of want to take a quick second to recap some of the earlier sections that I talked about. The first being how I get the kids that I work with. It all starts with the conversation. So that was the first section. I broke down who's involved with communicating about a student and how that communication actually happens. The next section, we actually dive into the referral meeting. So how that's set up, the key players involved, such as the parents, general education teacher, the school psychologist, LEA, local educational agency. All of these critical pieces, I discussed them in this second section. Then I came back with a more in-depth look at how the evaluation process takes place. So during that referral meeting, the kinds of things I'm listening for, the kinds of things I'm asking, try to get a grasp of how to customize and structure my evaluation. Then I broke down in a bonus clip the things that I listen for inside of the meeting and the questions I ask, all to get a grasp of how should I structure my evaluation towards any certain kid. I can only speak from my perspective, even though it may be a multidisciplinary evaluation. So that's where we're at, and this is where we're at today, going forth, talking about the eligibility. This is the kind of the segue into either a kid receiving special education services or not. So we're going to break down the two different kinds of outcomes that happen as a result of the eligibility meeting. After the evaluation has taken place, parents, teachers, everyone that's on the team that was at the original meeting should be contacted in order to set up this eligibility meeting. Now, the eligibility meeting can go one or two ways. The kid can be found eligible or not. Very simple. And so let's talk about the not first. So if a kid is not found eligible, what does that mean? It means that after we've reviewed, evaluators have reviewed the results of the testing, and parents, I encourage you very deeply to ask questions during this sharing of information, because at this point in time, and I can only speak for myself, that I pretty much have a good grasp of the kid. Albeit it's a one-on-one situation, but nonetheless, I still know the kid to a certain extent to where I should be able to answer your questions if you have them. So please do not be afraid to ask questions. Do not be afraid to challenge something. That's what this part is for. It's a multidisciplinary team approach. And like I mentioned before, you are a huge piece of the team. After we go through the evaluation and questions are asked, and everyone's understanding how the kid is processing, how the kid's functioning, then if they're found not eligible, that basically means that the evaluation was not indicative of the student meeting criteria in one of the 13 areas of special education that are outlined under the federal guideline. The kid is not meeting eligibility, so what does that mean? So there are a couple of different things that we will problem solve and kind of go through strategically. It's not like the student does not meet and then we kick them out to the dirt. No, it just means we have to be a little more creative on how to serve this student and how to provide certain levels of supports and stacking them on in any kind of way possible. Just to touch base on a few of them. Usually the student has been involved in some intervention up until the evaluation. They may continue with interventions. They may communicate, if they're transferring, they may communicate with a neighboring school to say, hey, this student is not eligible for special education services, but they were receiving this intervention. Could you please continue or take that information and run with it? So that's one way that a kid is helped without receiving special education. Another way would be if they have a medical diagnosis of some sort and they don't need special education, but they do need certain accommodations. And that's when what's known as a 504 plan that can be produced. So the 504, that's a whole nother topic and I'll get into, but basically if the kid's not meeting for special education, they can receive a 504 plan that will allow them to have these accommodations in the classroom. And so all's well ends well in that case. Other things that can be done after a kid is not eligible would be finding tutors. Maybe this has been explored before, but now that you have this awareness of how a kid is processing information based on my psychoeducational evaluation, now you can take that information and use it to your advantage when you're communicating with a tutor or someone that's providing extra support. Knowing how they think, their strengths and weaknesses, you can definitely tailor a unofficial plan to their development. Also, it may be time to, like I said, you have to be creative. And so see what kind of resources are available in the community, available at the school. Maybe there's study groups. Maybe there's a group of kids that you find very structured, that have a great will to learn and can teach others. Maybe this student gets in communication with that student. You have to be creative. Just because a kid is not eligible for special education services does not mean it's the end of the world. So now, let's talk about if a student is eligible. When you've gone through the evaluation, they are meeting certain criteria to find them eligible in one of those 13 ways that I mentioned for special education services. Now, with that information, it's a team decision. So the team has determined they are meeting this criteria and their weaknesses are to the point to where special education is necessary. And so the team is like, yay, we move forward. The kid is eligible. Now, I've seen it done one of two ways, and I'll talk about both of them. The first way would be to have that be the end of the meeting. The team creates a date within the near future, usually within a week, to meet back and discuss a draft individualized educational program. And what that is an IEP. You get back, you talk about a draft IEP. It's basically how the special education teacher plans to use the student's weaknesses and strengths to develop a plan. And it's based on outcomes. You have goals and you're working within a year's period on achieving those goals. All right. So the people in the meeting reconvene within about a week's time and discuss this draft IEP. Typically, I'm not involved in that meeting just because my information is shared, and that's the information that's relevant to understanding who the kid is and what the kid needs. Sure, I can be available for that meeting, but usually I'm not. Now, the ones I am a part of are if we transition from that eligibility meeting right into the IEP meeting. And what that looks like is prior to the eligibility meeting being set up, myself contacts the special education teacher, lets them know kind of how the data is looking. We collaborate with teachers, parents. I usually call to give parents a heads up of the meeting, just to go through results. If they have any questions, just hearing the information, they're not hit with anything for the first time at the meeting. I like parents to be very prepared, come with questions. I told you, I very strongly recommend you ask lots of questions during the meeting. And so by us transitioning from the eligibility piece right into the IEP, the teacher has a draft plan, very similar to what happened before. It's just she's kind of front loaded. Now, this is not to predetermine that a kid is going to meet eligibility or not. It's just to kind of be a little more prepared. And so understanding that if we do decide to discuss an IEP, then there will be a draft that we can systematically go through and talk about a proposed way that the kid can be served. Now, this is a draft, and I'm going to continue to put emphasis on that because we don't know what is needed until we have everyone's input. But just like true greatness, you have to be prepared. And so that's all it is. These are the two ways that the meeting transitions from the eligibility into recommendations and possible ways that the kid can be helped. So hearing this information, we have now made our way successfully from the referral, through the referral process, all the way to eligibility. I want to thank you for sticking with me. I want to thank you for going through each one of these and listening to just the personal insight that I'm able to provide, because if you have a student or you know of some student struggling and you just don't know where to start, I hope you find this very valuable in the sense of it giving you some insight into what to expect. I can't speak for other schools. I can't speak for other school psychologists, but I've done this for quite some time now, and I kind of get a feel for different school situations and how things are typically handled. And I hope that this is of value to you. So until next time, I'll see you back here on the School Site Corner. Much love.